Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the Tales from Tech Support subreddit. Before we start that, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Bob Arg, when the user wants an explanation of what went wrong. Back in the mid-1990s, I was working for a company that provided software to various financial corporations. One of our clients was an insurance company and was located on the 11th floor of our building. We were on the 8th floor. Our main client contact person was a woman named Sue. Now, Sue, my boss, and I all lived within half a mile of each other, and for several years carpooled from our home in suburbia to the building downtown. During these daily commutes, Sue would mention issues the office was having with the software, or she would suggest improvements. My boss was driving, so I took notes, and when we got to work, I would add her suggestions to our backlog and figure out the best way to incorporate her suggestions to our software. This was literally one of the best vendor-client relationships that I have ever been in. The symbiotic nature of a client making suggestions and the vendor providing those features based on a daily 60 to 90 minute commute was very effective. The 3 of us were really good friends. Anyway, sometimes Sue would ask, when I was doing such and such today, the system threw an error. Any idea why it happened? I would always tell her, I'll have a look at the log file, but I'm pretty sure it isn't an actual problem in our software. It's most likely a random cosmic event in the universe. Probably a neutrino flipping a bit in the memory core. I'll look at the log file tomorrow and confirm if that is what happened. Sue would laugh and then we would talk about the local sports teams or some other stuff. Anyway, one day I was installing some software in their server room. Sue was in the room with me, watching the installation process and being there in case I needed credentials for a section of the network to which I didn't have access. While we were waiting for the software to be installed, she asked me about a problem that one of her colleagues had run into the previous day. She said, "Oh, by the way, Lori had a problem yesterday that I think might have been another random cosmic event in the universe. Tell me again what those are." I launched into, well, approximately 9 minutes before she encountered the problem, a neutrino was formed in the center of the sun. It was expelled at the speed of light, hurtling towards Earth. 9 minutes later, it entered our atmosphere, went through the building, because neutrinos are incredibly tiny, don't you see? And because they're so small, went through everything. Walls, floors, tables, computers, everything. Except for some reason, it happened to hit one of the bits in the main memory chip for the CPU. That bit was originally a 1 and got flipped to be a 0. Or it could have been a 0 and it got flipped to a 1. Either way, as it continued on its journey through the center of the Earth and back out into the universe, that one single bit flip caused the CPU to stop its processing, and not knowing what else to do, because these kind of events are so rare, made it throw an exception. When we are done here, I'll take a look at the log file and figure out if I can confirm whether that is what happened. Sue laughed and said, "I thought it was something like that." I finished the installation, told her to email me the log file from the other user, and went back to my desk downstairs. About 5 minutes later, my boss asked me to come into his office. I got there, and he told me to shut the door. He said, "I just got an email from some other manager that I think you need to hear." Apparently, there were 2 people from my company in the client server room doing something on their AS400. They had heard me telling Sue the story about the neutrino, but they didn't know that Sue and I were good friends. The email included phrases similar to the following: unprofessional behavior, outright lying to the client, should be fired or severely reprimanded. The client was actually buying his unmitigated BS. After my heart stopped pounding and my boss started laughing, he then sent the other manager an email of explanation. In that email, he explained the relationship between me, him, my boss, and Sue, and that not only were we good friends, but she absolutely knew I was simply embellishing a story I had told her many times in our daily commutes. There was no love lost between our group and the other group. And to be honest, my boss had actually told me that the reason our group was held in such high regard by our clients was because we totally shined, whereas the other group was primarily known for screwing things up. The other manager was a not very friendly person and ruled his petty little fiefdom with an iron fist. Unfortunately for me, about 2 to 3 years later, there was a reorganization looming, and I realized that my next step would be to move over to the other manager's group. I took that as another sign of a random cosmic event in the universe and started looking for greener pastures. I left the company shortly thereafter. And about 6 months after I left, I heard that the other manager was fired because he had made repeated improper suggestions towards his female administrative assistant. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Angry Cod. It says, "I swear to all that's holy, those MFers who inserted themselves into a private and personal conversation that was none of their gosh darn business and then tried to anonymously have me fired over it would be on my crap list forever. I would spend every waking moment burning them to the ground." I've got to say that the commenter's taking things a little bit too far in this case. Yes, those people were listening into a conversation that they weren't a part of, but from their end, they see their coworkers speaking to somebody from a completely different company working on their server room. I can kinda see why they put in a report when they felt like Sue was just being fed a line. This story comes to us from Boat Kevin. Fire Department Phone Line. At my previous company, Company A, they owned Building 1 and Building 2. At some point, there was some weird restructuring and moving of buildings. At the end of this, Company A built a property, Building 3, and sold Building 2 and half of Building 1 to another company, B. They were all 3 in a row, so it was a little weird that we were split by them. There was an underground fiber line ran somewhere between our 2 buildings, 1 and 3. And there was an entire infrastructure set up between their 2 sites above ground, 2 and 3. There was also an enclosed walkway that connected them. Company B was making some facilities changes, and with this new system, they needed to make some other changes to continue to meet building codes. The enclosed walkway and anything in it needed to be completely demolished to separate the 2 buildings and allow emergency egress from all sides of their building too. They politely communicated the details to us, as good neighbors do, and our facilities team sent out details related to parking and site access. The construction was completed, everything seemed fine, some time passed. Our annual elevator certification was scheduled, and part of this included checking that the emergency phone line worked. You know how if you get trapped in an elevator, you should be able to press the emergency button or lift a phone and immediately get transferred to the local emergency services? That phone. The inspection people tested the phone, and nothing. Line was dead. We were given a few weeks to make the necessary changes and get it back up to code, and they would reschedule. My boss tried to get in touch with a certain major national ISP whose name is 3 letters with a symbol. We had the absolute worst luck with them. Every time we needed support, our provided account numbers couldn't be found. Eventually, they would just open a new account for us. Our billing team was convinced they never applied an overpayment correctly, but they couldn't get anything communicated because of all the issues with the account. A year before this story, they accidentally canceled one of our other phone lines and gave away the number, so we didn't even know which phone number was supposed to be assigned to this elevator. Our account manager was no longer with the company. The replacement person who was listed on their voicemail message didn't even work on the AM team anymore. We eventually got a response from some VP who was able to provide us with our new AM, who scheduled an on-site visit to troubleshoot and repair the phone line. I was the on-site tech for the day and got the phone call that the ISP tech would be there in about 5 minutes. I normally worked from Building 3, so I headed over to Building 1 to meet him. 10 minutes later, he called me and said that he's in the lobby of Building 2. I told him that we no longer worked from Building 2 as of about 15 years prior, but he insists that's where the billing address was. I told him it certainly wasn't, and that the elevator was in building 1. I was standing inside the comms room, and there was a very clearly labeled box that had "Property of Provider, Do Not Touch" stamped on it. The technician eventually believed me and walked to building 1. He measured all of the lines and there was no voltage going to any of them, which implied nothing was hooked up. The line had a faded paper tag written in pencil hanging from it. It listed a phone number that matched the previous number that had been accidentally disconnected, not our current one reflecting our most updated billing statements. He continued to insist that the demarc was listed as building 2 and that he needed to measure it from there. I told him that I had no access to that building or knowledge of where the comms room would be, or ability to get him access either. He said he would go check the main box somewhere else and left. I sat in the comms room with my laptop and continued to work other tickets while this guy was gone for about 25 minutes. He came back and told me that he was able to confirm in that other equipment box that our line went to the same point as the other company's line, and it was definitely in building 2, with an install date roughly a year prior. That time frame was peak COVID times, when our team wasn't on site, and about 2 months before I'd started working there. It was also around the time when the ISP had stupidly gotten rid of our line and changed our phone number. Some confused technician had been given the wrong address because of a billing address clerical error because of the complete disaster that was our account history with this provider. He'd wandered into building 2 and activated our line in the wrong building. Because the two buildings were connected, the line went through the overground walkway directly to the elevator. When Company B did their construction project, their IT department had no knowledge of the elevator phone line because it wasn't their account. We had no knowledge they'd done this improperly because we'd told them the issue was with building 1. When the construction was done, they took down the infrastructure because, to their knowledge, it was legacy and not live. The technician packed up his stuff and told me since he was a repair tech, he wasn't able to help. I needed to call our account manager back and request an installation so they could send an installation tech instead. I hate 3-letter 1-symbol provider. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Bin Chicken Dreaming. It says, "So, what happened next?" OP responded and said, "I got transferred to building 4 in a different town, and our boss gave this disaster to a coworker of mine. I never heard an update from him. Assumption time. I'm pretty sure the installers were able to reroute things internally with the line, so it only relied on building 1. Probably didn't communicate the information properly, never update the billing address, maybe another phone number change for poops and giggles, billing charges that made no sense, and a new account number just for good measure. I have nothing to back this up, but in my heart, I'm certain I'm right." Alright, maybe I'm just not understanding this, but why wouldn't you just go with a different ISP if the one that you're with is causing this many problems? I mean, unless this is the only one available in the area, why keep going on with it? This story comes to us from AnxiousJob772, working for a clueless boss. I worked as an IT assistant intern for a boss in a small tech company in London. I mostly did small maintenance tasks, moved stuff around, and helped around the office, the basic intern stuff. The adventure begins when my boss, who is ironically helpless with computers, claims his mouse right-click has stopped working. I go to his office and troubleshoot that he has somehow managed to disable it. Okay, no problem, happens to the best of us. Next day, he tells me that his email has stopped working on his phone and has to be fixed ASAP before a business trip. He refuses to give me the phone as it is sensitive information, and just tell him what to do. It's worth mentioning, I have no clue what the phone is, what email he uses, or anything. After gruesome troubleshooting, is internet working, are you logged in, blah blah, that leads nowhere, he gets tired and orders me to call his phone operator and fix it. I explain politely that his phone operator has absolutely nothing to do with his email, at least in 99% of cases, and that won't be any help. Now boss starts yelling, orders me to take a phone and call the support line. He even watches me to get started. So, fine, let's do this theater. I ring up his service provider, and after a 30-minute queue, start explaining the issue. There is a long pause. They ask me to put boss on the phone to explain. I realize they are probably laughing back there. I bring the phone to the boss, who refuses to take it and wants me to handle the issue. I try again, telling my boss's name, etc., and what contract he has, making sure in case there's some strange business deal of an email service from the phone service. They respond that I'm not allowed to know because I am not my boss and it must be him personally. I hang up, and as my workday is over, leave a note for the boss to call them and do his thing. I am still 100% certain that the problem is something of a restart phone nature, but whatever. Tomorrow comes, boss is asking if email is fixed. I explain I left a note, which he saw but ignored. I tell him there is nothing I can do if I cannot see his phone and find out what the issue is. He still refuses and eventually leaves on his business trip. A week later, his email still not working, he comes with a face of defeat and gives me the phone. He had no email the whole trip, which caused a lot of problems, and he is now hopeless. I take the phone, see that he has an absolute ancient version of the OS, which stopped supporting the Gmail app as he refused to update anything. Takes me 5 minutes to update, everything works. Another day, boss comes to me furious, saying that an important project is missing some marketing files, video footage, and I absolutely need to find it for him because he can't handle computers. No problem. I start digging around in a mountain of dated hard drives and find that said files do not exist anywhere. I say that I have no clue about those, as it is dated before I even worked there. I contact the marketing team who actually have the files inside video editing projects. Now, here it is important to know that when you have complex video multicam footage with a lot of audio meant for an ad, one does not simply give them to the boss man. They are synced and organized inside the editing software over weeks, and the raw material itself is an insane task to go through. That's why films have editors, by the way, and not possible to watch with synced audio. I explained to the boss that you can't have the files because, quite frankly, you probably can't use an editing software to look at them, and the marketing team knows what they're doing. No, boss needs those videos immediately. He needs to see the footage and pick the best parts. I go back and forth with the marketing team. They send me the footage, which I can open on a computer and organize, sync audio, etc. in an editing software for boss to see. They could not send the actual editing projects because of some bureaucracy and technical reasons I don't remember anymore. But of course, boss doesn't know how to use said editing software, so I end up spending a day gathering the footage and organizing it in a simple way to watch inside the software project timeline. This timeline was specifically made for him, only containing footage of another, like a complex playlist. The boss wants privacy in watching and somehow manages to play stuff on his own. He writes down times showing on the video player and makes notes like this is good, this is best, etc. And then I get yelled at because apparently his notes and time codes make absolutely no sense to the marketing team. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called SoldierPH. It says, "Boss man be like, no touch, only fix, but without touching." I couldn't help when listening to the part about the phone, thinking about how much of a security risk it was having an unpatched, outdated phone with company email on it. OP, I'm glad the first line in your story was "I worked at," which tells us you no longer work there. I hope you're in greener pastures now, because I wouldn't want to stay with a boss that incompetent. Did you know every KCC video is also produced in podcast form? You can search for Karma Comment Chameleon on every major podcasting platform. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.